The OPP have arrested 14 people in a grandparent scam targeting seniors all over the country. We're going to tell you more about that coming up.
And a point of order in the Ontario legislature to allow the wearing of the keffiyeh by MPPs. It failed this morning despite support by leaders of every party.
And City Council is discussing the vacant home tax debacle after thousands of homeowners were wrongly sent vacant home tax assessments. That's Deputy Mayor Asma Malik speaking.
Good afternoon and welcome to CP24 Live at noon. I'm Bakari Savage.
And I'm Lena Latifat. Thanks so much for joining us. Ontario and Quebec Provincial Police, they've announced the results of a major joint operation.
And CP24's Courtney Hills is following this story and joins us live from Scarborough with the latest. Courtney.
And Bakari, Lena, this is an investigation that's been taking place in Ontario and Quebec for many, many months. It involves what's known as an emergency grandparent scam. Essentially, these suspects will target people who are especially vulnerable, who are older, they have landline phones, they're called up and they receive a phone message or somebody on the other line saying that they're a judge or a police officer or a loved one. They will make threats towards that vulnerable senior and demand cash. And what we're seeing as part of this investigation, just in the past couple of months, about $739,000 lost to fraudsters. Again, this is just in the last couple of months, but it's been going on for a long time. Now, I want to bring in Deputy Chief Dubé with the Sûreté du Police. So Quebec Police are a really big part of this because the suspects, 14 of them arrested in Quebec. What can you tell us about their involvement in organized crime?
The 14 suspects are aged between 24 and 34 years old, and the investigation showed they had tied to Italian traditional organized crime.
And were these individuals already on your radar? Did you know anything about these individuals prior to arresting them and looking into them?
Not really. We had a couple of some suspects that we knew, but they were really under the radar.
Okay. And what more can you tell us about the access to the cash that they received scamming these vulnerable people? What do you think they were doing with that money?
But what the investigation shows, they were buying drugs, they were spending their money on cars, condos, on luxury. That's what the investigation shows.
So Quebec Police working really, really closely with Provincial Police on this investigation. Can you speak to how that relationship helped lead to the arrests of 14 people and help also bring some answers to the victims in all of this?
I think in 2024 we need to work together. The collaboration is really necessary. So the suspects were in Montreal, were in the Quebec province, but all the victims, pretty much of the victims were in Ontario. That if we wouldn't never collaboration, we wouldn't have those arrests or that success. So that collaboration made that we arrest 14 people and we stopped that grandparent scam fraud.
Why is it, do you think, the victims were targeted here in Ontario and the suspects were in Quebec? Why focus on our province?
But it was all around Canada. It depends on all of the information they had on the victims. So it's all about the info that was out there, and they took the best info out there, and lots of people were from Ontario.
Mm-hmm. And when it comes to these victims, we know the suspects were looking for people who were older and had access to landline phones. What more can you tell us about how you were able to track down those individuals believed to be responsible for this?
Well, that's all investigation technique there. We're talking about surveillance, we're talking about wiretaps. It's all pretty sophisticated investigation to put a stop to that organized crime group.
And a lot of resources that went into this.
Lots of resources, lots of time, but was really a priority for the province of Ontario, but also for the province of Quebec.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate your time this afternoon. And this is a priority, guys, for police because they say there are so many victims. In fact, they believe really only 5 to 10% of these cases are being reported because the victims are embarrassed and they're handing over thousands of dollars. They can't believe they have fallen for a scam like this. So the message from police, they want people to know, a police officer or a judge would never phone you and demand cash and then show up at your door asking for that money. The information is really, really key, especially for people who are vulnerable. Over to you.
Okay, Courtney Hills reporting live. Thank you, Courtney. The fate of a man charged with murder in the death of a Toronto police officer could soon be in the hands of a jury. Umar Zamir has pleaded not guilty to first-degree murder in the death of Constable Jeffrey Northrup. Northrop died after he was hit by a car in an underground parking garage in July of 2021. The judge continuing her instructions to jurors this afternoon before they are set to start deliberations. The Crown alleges Zamir made a series of maneuvers with his vehicle that led to Northrop's death, but the defense says the collision was a tragic accident.
Well, city councilors are discussing the vacant home tax program, which turned into a fiasco. Here's a live look right now. This is Councillor Paula Fletcher. Tens of thousands of homeowners received notices for payment of sometimes more than $10,000, even though they submitted the proper paperwork, while others faced language barriers or didn't understand that they had to submit the form every year. The city was inundated with calls from panicked residents. They're now trying to fix the mess. Mayor Olivia Chow said yesterday that the person who designed the program no longer works for the city. So also yesterday, council approved increases in fines for a litany of parking-related violations. The steeper penalties are coming after a staff report showed that fines in the city, they're out of step with other municipalities. So the cost of a ticket for failing to pay at parking machines is going from $30 to $50. It's actually lower than the $75 fine, which was initially proposed. And parking in a bike lane, that's going to cost you $200, which is up from the current fine of $150.
A point of order in the Ontario legislature to allow the wearing of the keffiyeh by MPPs failed this morning, despite support by the leaders of every party.
Agreed? No, agreed. I heard some no's.
Good morning, Speaker.
The Leader of the Opposition, Marit Stiles, rose to seek unanimous consent that the keffiyeh is a culturally significant clothing item to many in Ontario's Palestinian, Muslim, and Arab communities and should not be considered an expression of a political message and would not cause disorder. Now, the Speaker of the House, Ted Arnott, who had previously made the decision to ban the keffiyeh, made this statement before the oral vote.
In this House, at the present time, is not a political statement. I would certainly and unequivocally accept the expressed will of the House, with no ifs, ands, or buts. Again, I would be willing to entertain such a point of order at any time and put the question to the House forthwith.
Premier Doug Ford spoke about the ban this morning, saying that it is unnecessarily divisive.
Keffiyeh goes back to the 7th century, but it really comes down to uniting Ontarians and communities. We see the division right now that's going on. It's not healthy, and this would just divide the community even more. So I stand by that.
And Ontario Liberal leader Bonnie Cromby urged the Speaker to reconsider the ban this morning.
I believe there have been other members who have worn it. How does it make that different from other religious symbols or other symbols that people do wear? Again, I'm just going to say that Ontario is very diverse, and we can't look for ways to divide people. We need to bring people together.
And the leader of the Green Party has also written a letter to the Speaker asking for the keffiyeh to be allowed to be worn.
Well, it is just the beginning of 3 long years of traffic headaches on the main artery just getting in and out of Toronto, but political leaders, they're already chiming in.
Traffic has been building on the eastbound lanes getting into the city starting around 6 a.m. There have also been reports during peak times of drivers stuck in gridlock on the highway for over an hour. The bulk of the construction started last week from Dufferin Street to Strawn Avenue, and that's all part of a major rehabilitation project on the aging highway. So the Premier was asked this morning whether anything could be done to alleviate this gridlock.
What we're doing, we're putting the largest infrastructure project, in North America right now on building transit to get people to the cars. We're investing over $28 billion into building new highways and roads. And now the Gardner, since we've uploaded it to the province and DVP, we'll be coming out with plans, working in collaboration with the City of Toronto. But it's the traffic's pretty heavy everywhere in the province.
Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland admitted that her drive from downtown Toronto to Burlington, it took a while this morning.
I had a good conversation with Premier Ford on Monday about a lot of things, but including infrastructure and including specifically the Gardner that he's uploaded responsibility for. I know Ontario is focused on that. I agree with you that infrastructure is tremendously important.
And work's currently being done from Monday to Saturday between 7 a.m. and 11 p.m. with no crews working overnight or on Sundays.
Well, the cost of filling up the tank, that just got more expensive as well.
Yeah, let's turn things over to CTV's Scott Hurst with the latest on where gas prices are. So, Scott, how much did prices jump overnight and what regions are feeling it the most?
Bakari and Lena, 14 cents is what a lot of drivers woke up to through Ontario and Quebec today. 14-cent increase from just the night before. And this all has to do with the switch from the winter to the summer blend. Now, you compare that to last year. According to experts, the price went up about 8 cents last year from the switch from the winter to the summer blend. Now, according to Dan McTague with Canadians for Affordable Energy, the difference has to do, one, with a weaker Canadian dollar, but also the price of what goes into that summer blend. And the summer blend uses much more alkylate in that. And it ultimately is better for the vehicle and better for the environment. And so this is what helps the vehicle run better in the summertime, but it is much more expensive. So that is why there's a difference from last year going up about 8 cents to this year, 14 cents. However, when drivers showed up and have been stuck paying it, of course, that is cold comfort when you have to fill up your tank and see the price you pay going up and up and up. And so it is incredibly frustrating, of course, for drivers who have been dealing with several increases to gas recently. Of course, there was the about 3-cent increase from the increase on the price on carbon for April 1st. And so drivers are left forced to fill up without any other options because, of course, they have to get to work and businesses also have to pay. Here's more with Dan McTague for Canadians for Affordable Energy.
Traditionally, when I predicted gas prices this time of year, 6 to 10 cents a liter is about what you see an increase. This time, 14, because, of course, the cost of that product has really skyrocketed. That's the bad news. The good news, of course, is that around September 15th to 18th, you will see a corresponding decrease of about 8 to 10 cents a liter at least. And we saw this last September. Many people avoided it, didn't think it happened. But on September 18th, it dropped here in Toronto from $1.70.9 to $1.62.9 in one fell swoop.
So, Bakari and Lena, for drivers here in the GTA, it was about $179.9. That is what a lot of drivers were forced to pay earlier today. And that is kind of the range, the highest we've been paying in nearly 2 years' time.
All right. And Scott, I know there's been a lot of talk about all the different factors behind this spike. Can you talk more about that?
Well, the main factor behind the spike is the switch from the winter to the summer blend, and then the cost for more of the product that goes into the summer blend. And you heard Dan McTague there say after the summer blend in September, when they do switch back to the winter, it will go down about 8 cents and maybe even more with the price that went up 14 cents today. So drivers will see that relief likely in the fall as we head into the fall. But Dan McTague is also saying we could see another drop in price of about 4 cents heading into the weekend. So at least some temporary relief for drivers.
Okay, CTV's Scott Hurst, thank you.
Thank you.
And coming up next on CP24 Live at noon, the judge is giving final instructions to the jury in the Umar Zamir trial. We're going to talk to criminal defense lawyer Kim Schofield. That's after the break. The jury is set to start deliberating the fate of Umar Zamir, the man accused of first-degree murder and the death of Toronto police officer Jeffrey Northrup. This was in 2021.
And for a closer look at this, we want to bring in criminal defense lawyer Kim Schofield now. Thanks so much for joining us. In closing arguments last night, the Crown asked the jury to consider the lesser offense of manslaughter. What do you make of that position? Is this because prosecutors are realizing that's their best shot?
Well, I think that they realize that they have some problems. So in order for the jury to find first-degree murder, they must find it's not a planning and deliberation situation because the officer, by the nature of the fact that the officer is an officer, but they would have to find beyond a reasonable doubt that the accused knew that he was a police officer. So in other words, in this case, that the officer identified himself or others identified themselves as police officers, and they must be satisfied that they knew he was, or that he knew that they were police officers. And there's really a lot of contradictory evidence on that point here.
So today the judge is instructing the jury. Walk us through next steps.
Okay, so the judge instructs the jury. So the judge will tell the jury that he is, or she, in this case, Justice Malloy, is the judge of the law. So she gives them the law. And the jurors are the judge of the facts. So they apply the facts to the law. And and she'll also advise them about the various verdicts and probably give them a verdict sheet. So a sheet of all the possible verdicts: guilty, not guilty, lesser included offenses, and the elements of those offenses. So it will be, and usually is, but I think especially in a case like this, a complex charge to the jury. So in other words, we have 3 years of law school compressed into an hour to 2 hour address or charge to the jury by the judge. It is a very difficult task for jurors.
A lot of lawyers are saying that, Kim. And then, of course, all eyes will be on jury deliberations, which will begin soon. Do you see jurors reaching a quick verdict here?
Well, as complex as the law is in this case, the question really is this: why on earth would this man, Mr. Zamir, why would he intentionally run over a police officer? Why would he commit a homicide, a culpable homicide? And because the defense points to the fact that he was there doing nothing wrong. He had his pregnant wife and his child in the car. It was a celebration that he was that he had just attended. So all of these point to the fact that there's no intention to kill. So then it comes to whether a manslaughter is made out. So whether this activity is a marked departure, whether there's recklessness, carelessness, or whether it is a tragic accident.
And the defense, on the other hand, is urging jurors to acquit Umar Zamir, saying that the tragedy is not the same thing as injustice. So how difficult is it for the jury to try and decide between a full acquittal and manslaughter?
Well, I think in this case, a series of events happened, and the series of events which are very different between what the police officers say and, in fact, what the forensics say, both the forensics on part of the Crown and on part of the defense. It seems quite clear that the officer was hit and grazed by the car, which caused him to fall down, and then once when on the ground, that's when he was run over. And that seems to be contrary to the accounts of the police officers. And as defense counsel has said, the account of the police officers, we know from the experts, it doesn't seem to be what has happened, but they're all consistently inaccurate, which means that, at least on part of the defense, they're going to say that the police officers have basically all gotten together and got their story straight. So that, of course, does not assist the Crown at all.
Okay, criminal defense lawyer Kim Schofield, we know you're watching this one really closely, and hopefully we can check back in with you once the jury does reach a verdict. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks, Kim.
Yes, please do. Have a good day.
And coming up next on CP24 Live at noon, the Canadian Taxpayers Federation is calling for the vacant home tax to be scrapped. We're going to speak to them next. Toronto City Councillors are discussing the vacant home tax program that turned into just a fiasco. Right now, we are looking at Brad Bradford speak. The Canadian Taxpayers Federation is calling on Mayor Olivia Chow to scrap the vacant home tax. So right now, we're joined live with Jay Goldberg, Ontario and interim Atlantic Director, Canadian Taxpayers Federation. So, okay, Jay, aside from this, debacle, what are your thoughts on this tax?
Well, ultimately, we don't think that this is the right approach when it comes to trying to have more housing supply in the city of Toronto. So first of all, we know that 167,000 or so people received notice that their properties were declared vacant simply because they forgot to fill out a form. And the city has already had to refund over 108,000 of those to individuals. And so this is actually bogging up the time of people who work for the city. This is costing a lot of money in terms of manpower. And so, when you look at the revenue they're getting from the tax and you compare that to all of this angst that's being caused, it's certainly not nearly worth it on those grounds alone. But I would say that we need to look at what we're getting out of this and what we're not getting out of this. So last year, only about 4,000 homes in the city of Toronto were declared vacant. That's not actually bringing in the city a lot of money. And it also shows you that when you're charging 167,000 people the next year, just how dramatically off those numbers and those charges were. So we've consistently said that the best way to promote homes in the city of Toronto and elsewhere is to stimulate supply, and that means getting developer fees lowered. That means encouraging supply whenever possible. So fourplexes throughout the city. The province is now finally rewarding cities with additional dollars when they do meet provincial housing targets. We need to be selling off some municipal and government land to try to make sure that we can construct more homes on unused lands. These are the things that we should be doing instead of turning to a tax that, quite frankly, a lot of people that have a vacant home but are doing so because they're doing renovations or something like that, they're going to have to pay regardless. There's not that many people sitting in the city of Toronto that have that own multiple vacant homes that are willing to pay property tax on those homes and not live in them. So it's really not a very good approach to housing policy or taxation policy.
Jay, what does it say to you that you have two councillors echoing your calls for this to just be scrapped?
Well, I think these councillors know that it's more trouble than it's worth. I think they know that this was a bad tax from the start. It was only brought in a couple of years ago. This is a very new tax. The city never had to rely on this income 2 years ago or more. And so I think the councillors are recognizing that this is incredibly damaging. The other thing is, if you own a home in Toronto, the average home price is about $1 million. If your home happens to be vacant for 6 months of that year, you're getting a $10,000 bill because it's 1% of your property. That's going up to 3% for most homes next year. So you'd be looking at bills like $30,000 simply because some people perhaps choose to spend a portion of the year in other countries, at a vacation home, or they're away for a portion of the year. So this would essentially force people to have to sell their homes if they're not using them for at least 6 months of the year. There are some people who don't, but they're still paying taxes. They're still paying property taxes. And this really isn't going to strongly affect supply, as I said, because only 4,000 people paid these taxes last year. So instead of doing that, you focus on stimulating supply by building more homes, cutting red tape, and making sure that we're selling off federal, provincial, municipal lands that are not being used so that we can build more affordable homes on those lands.
Okay, Jay Goldberg, Ontario and Interim Atlantic Director, Canadian Taxpayers Federation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, coming up next on CP24 Live at Noon, the OPP have arrested 14 people in a grandparent scam targeting seniors all over the country. I'll tell you about that next.
The OPP have arrested 14 people in a grandparent scam targeting seniors all across the country.
A point of order in the Ontario legislature to allow the wearing of the keffiyeh by MPPs failed this morning, despite support by the leaders of every party.
And City Council discussing the vacant home tax debacle after thousands of homeowners were wrongly sent vacant home tax assessments.
Good afternoon and welcome to CP24 Live at Noon. I'm Lena Latafat.
Now, Bakari Savage, Mayor Olivia Chow speaking to the media at City Hall. Let's take you there right now.
Well, there were 112,000 calls. This year, a bit less. And going forward, what we've done today at Council is no late fees. All the folks that have appealed are now told they don't have to pay. The appeal period, rather than 2 months last year, it's now 2 weeks or less. and that we are redesigning the entire program. Those that didn't appeal, and we assume their homes are not vacant, so we're reversing the onus. So we're fixing the mess that I've inherited, and next year will be so much better.
Are you concerned that there are now discussions about whether to get rid of this tax altogether, simply as a result of a poor communications and rollout strategy that it's come to this point?
No, I think majority of councillors understand that we're in the middle of a housing crisis and that we need to get more supply, more housing units, more homes for people. So there's no debate about that. The purpose of this whole program is to push these speculators or foreign owners to make a decision. Are they going to leave these units vacant in the middle of a housing crisis? That's not acceptable, and that's why they need to pay.
Did you meet with the city manager at any point on this?
I meet with the city manager every week on a Tuesday, and yes, I have raised this several times. However, the entire program that was designed, that was approved in 2021, is deeply flawed. And it started rolling out in June of last year, and I wasn't a mayor at that time. And by the time I arrived here, the whole program was already rolling out, unfortunately. And the deadline that was extended, the reason why it's 2 weeks, because the program said that the deadline is March 15th. So literally the entire program was designed in a way that had no sense. So I think what we need to do is take the common sense approach back to it. It makes no sense to send out 165,000 notice when last year only 11,000 units were declared vacant. Like, for God's sake, how could it be? So the design of the program that was approved in 2021 was just deeply flawed.
Some of the discussion on the floor suggested that you should be held accountable for this. You're suggesting it's not necessarily on you. So who should be held accountable for that?
I think collectively, all of us in the position, councillors, me as a mayor, I apologized on behalf of the city to those people, over 150,000 of them, that have for no good reason received this very scary notice. I apologized to them and said that, look, it's a mess I inherited and I'm cleaning it.
But can you understand, though, I know you're saying that it was already rolling out by the time you came on the job, but when people were actually getting those initial options to opt in, opt out, you were on the job. There were issues that were faced. So can you understand why some people might find it unacceptable to say, listen, the wheels were already in motion?
What do you mean opt in, opt out?
With the vacant home tax,
Oh, and they received the note. They received the note.
The initial note.
Yeah, the first note was sent out, but the program was designed way before I even arrived. It was approved with all the deadlines baked in December of 2021. I was nowhere near City Council, and it was rolling out in June of last year. The initial rollout of last year has already been poor, which resulted in 112,000 calls to the city. So we already knew there's some problems with it. And I did ask the city manager to keep an eye on it because I too had to appeal. And what was unfair for myself personally, was that it took 2 months for the appeal to get processed. In the middle of it, the bill showed up and said that I have to pay $4,000 or $5,000. That's the first installment. And so I didn't pay. So the deadline for getting the appeal through versus when the bill shows up are completely out of sync.
So, Mantra, you said that you inherited part of this problem. And now you're vowing to fix it. So if we come around to next year and it rolls out and it doesn't go well or smoothly,
and it's my fault. Absolutely. next year, if it has no common sense approach, if it's communicated poorly, the design of the program is deeply flawed, then absolutely I will take full responsibility. For this year, I came into it midway. Yes, all of us should be more vigilant, and for that I apologize to some of the homeowners that are really deeply scared of this charge, that there's no reason for them to get it. Now, the ironic thing is that we now prove that it doesn't take 6 weeks or plus or 2 months to get an appeal. We now know that when if you sign a declaration, you should get a receipt. All of those things that were done wrong last year will now get fixed.
Mayor Chow, I want to ask you again about the comments you made about the former staff member. Did you intentionally mischaracterize his departure from the city?
No, not at all. I'd rather not discuss the details of a human resource matter. The only thing I said is that, well, I already commented on it. It was very clear that the person that designed the program is not with the city anymore.
But the implication there is...
No, you know what? I really should not go into a human resource matter in front of the TV, and that is unfair to everyone involved.
Then why volunteer it initially?
Because you asked me the question, is the person in charge still here? I said no.
No.
That's all I said.
In fact, I didn't ask you that on Friday, and in the scrum yesterday, I believe that you volunteered that information as well.
Well, because a lot of people have been asking who designed it and what's happening, and should someone, I think you interviewed me on Friday, online, on Zoom, and the question was, should someone, whoever designed this, what happened, or something of that nature, right? So I was upfront and said, that person is not here.
I did ask yesterday.
Thank you.
All right, that's Olivia Chow commenting on the vacant home tax debacle. She says the person who designed the program is no longer with the city. Wouldn't say more, though. Also apologized to residents for the entire mishap. We'll have more on that throughout the day. Meantime, an NDP motion to allow the wearing of keffiyehs in the legislature failed this morning after not receiving unanimous consent, despite support by the leaders of every party. Premier Doug Ford has said he does not support the keffiyeh ban. And for more on what happens next, we want to bring in Ontario's NDP leader, Umar Stiles. Ms. Stiles, thanks so much for joining us. You were seeking unanimous consent in the House this morning. That did not happen. At least one nay was heard. Let me start with your reaction.
Well, I mean, first of all, we brought the unanimous consent motion forward because the Premier had said that he would welcome that. He didn't agree with the Speaker's position on this issue. And I, as the Leader of the Official Opposition, don't either. And we raised the issue initially. So we raised this unanimous consent motion, and it was not supported by all of the Conservative MPPs. And I was disappointed in that outcome. I still think it was the right thing to do. And I'm hoping that the Premier will make sure that his people now do the right thing.
Are you prepared to table an official motion calling for the reversal of the keffiyeh ban? What's your message to others in the legislature, Ms. Stiles?
Well, look, I mean, I think this is the only legislature in Canada, including Parliament, where the keffiyeh has been banned now. We're concerned about that. Obviously, we believe that it's a cultural attire, and it speaks to a community's heritage. It's worn by both Muslim, Palestinian, Arab people, and so we're really concerned that the Speaker made this decision. But at the end of the day, if we, both myself and the Premier, agree that people should be able to wear it in the legislature, I really do expect the Premier to make sure that all of his people are doing the right thing as well. And we'll look at what next steps are possible, but it was very disappointing this morning.
I want to get to what the Speaker of the House, Ted Arnott, said, and I know that you wrote to him last week as well, but he believes the keffiyeh makes an overt political statement. What do you say to that?
I mean, look, as I've said to the Speaker in my letter last week, and this came up because we had staff as well as members of the public who were guests here in the legislature who were asked suddenly last week to remove the keffiyeh. So we believe that this is cultural attire. There are times when, you know, our cultural attire takes on political significance depending on the moment we're in. Kilts once had political significance, right? A kirpan. But in this is cultural attire, and people in Ontario should be able to wear that and be proud of their community and their heritage. So I disagree with the Speaker on that, which is why I wrote to him last week. I was disappointed that he, reconfirmed his position. I was pleased that the Premier decided to speak out in support of what I was calling for, and I was disappointed again that the vote, that the unanimous consent motion didn't pass. I think the Premier needs to make sure his people are on board with doing the right thing.
The Premier was asked about this morning as well, and you are on the same page here. Doug Ford saying, hoping the Speaker will change his mind, and he argues this is going to only create more division. Do you think Speaker Arnott is going to change his mind? Are you hopeful?
Well, the Speaker made very clear this morning in a statement before we put forward our motion that if the members of the legislature have a different perspective and want this to be more, we can do that. We can make that happen with the unanimous consent motion, which is why I did it. So I think that the Speaker needs the legislature to make the change, which means the government needs to be on board. All of the parties need to be on board, every MPP. Nobody can say no. They have to all agree. It's a unanimous consent motion. So we're hopeful that the government will, that the Premier will do the right thing, talk to his members and make sure that they agree, all are in agreement with us.
Okay, Ontario NDP Leader Umar Stiles, thanks so much for making time for us.
My pleasure, thank you.
A multi-jurisdictional investigation has taken down a major grandparent scam in CP24's Courtney Hills is following the story and joins us live from Scarborough with the latest.
And Bakari, police announcing today 14 individuals have been arrested and charged in connection with the scam. These individuals from Montreal, but they say they were focused on victims in Ontario. And we also heard from police saying that this scam is a major problem, preying on vulnerable seniors within the community. The way it works, it's known as the emergency grandparent scam. People will track down seniors who have landline phones. They'll call them up. They'll pretend to be someone in a position of authority. So say a police officer, a judge, a lawyer, or even a family member, and they will demand cash, and in some cases they'll even threaten the person, the victim, on the phone, and that person will go out, get the money, and hand it over. Police say they've received a number of calls over this. They believe there are a lot of victims as a result of this scam. They're also talking about the impact in this. So today they say they've made arrests, they've laid about 56 charges, but the focus here, they want people to know this scam is going around. Here's more.
In some cases, the victims were aggressively threatened if they did not agree to pay the amount. Furthermore, several victims experienced multiple instances of re-victimization, and more than a dozen suffered additional financial loss. The funds lost were significant, as they represented the life savings of many of these individuals. This not only affects their future plans, but also puts them into a state of uncertainty with increased stress. This crime goes beyond just financial distress. It causes substantial emotional suffering as well.
You heard from police there talking about the impact on the victims, the many victims of this scam. In fact, they said today they really believe only between 5 and 10% of these crimes are reported because people are embarrassed. They're mortified that they fall for something like this. But they also say these are really sophisticated crime rings with ties to organized crime. So the message from police, of course, report that. Also be aware police would never call you and make the request to hand over cash. It's really important that the community, especially vulnerable members, know about this scam and the many different scams going around. Lena, Bakari, over to you guys.
Okay, CP24's Courtney Hills, thank you. And the fate of a man charged with murder and the death of a Toronto police officer could soon be in the hands of a jury.
And for the latest on the Umar Zamir trial, let's go live to CP24's Beatrice Faisman at the University Avenue Courthouse. Beatrice.
Lena and Bakari, deliberations could begin as early as late this afternoon or early this evening, depending on how long it takes Her Honor to go through her instructions to the jury. And she's got lots of instructions, about a 100-page document she's reading to the jury members, page by page, carefully instructing them about what their role is in this trial, carefully going over each piece of evidence presented by each witness who took the stand, going through evidence even from preliminary hearing as it applies to this particular case, and comments made by certain witnesses. For example, Sergeant Lisa Forbes, Constable Northrop's partner, during her testimony during trial, and having the jurors look at her testimony from the preliminary hearing that was brought up in this trial and seeing how it compares, deciding which versions of events from different witnesses to take into account, as they have a really arduous task ahead of them. The jury is going to be tasked with deciding the fate of Umar Zamir. He's charged with first-degree murder. He can be found guilty of first-degree or second-degree murder or manslaughter, or he can be acquitted altogether. So several different scenarios for the jury members to consider, but certainly they're getting instructions from Her Honor Anne Malloy on particularly the law, the parameters of the law, and different things that they should or should not be taking into consideration as they prepare to be sequestered. Keep in mind, as we've been reporting for weeks now, the Crown and the defense presenting very different arguments. Of course, the defense lawyer in his final arguments to the jury yesterday said that this was a horrific, tragic accident, that Constable Jeffrey Northrop died under the weight of Umar Zamir's vehicle back on July 2nd, 2021, but that his client did not perform a criminal act, but that it was an accident performed out of fear for the safety of his life and his family's life, arguing that they did not know that they were police officers as they were dressed in plain clothes, and argued that they did not behave as police officers that night in the underground parking lot here at City Hall. The Crown very much presenting a different argument, focusing on Umar Zamir's choices. Now, choices has really been the crux of their argument. They say he had a series of choices when he decided to maneuver his vehicle a certain way, striking Constable Northrop, putting him to the ground, and then a choice, as the Crown told the jury yesterday, to run over Constable Northrop, something that the defense has argued Mr. Zamir thought was a speed bump, not a person, and a choice, the Crown said, to continue driving away without ever stopping or looking behind him. And so the judge now going over her final instructions to the jury, telling them yesterday to bring their pajamas and their toothbrush, because once the instructions are over, they will be sequestered to begin deliberations and try to come up with a verdict in this case. Lena and Bakari.
All right, Beatrice Faisman reporting live. Thanks so much. Coming up next on CP24 Live at Noon, Prince William has returned to his public duties for the first time since his wife's cancer diagnosis. We'll take a closer look at that next. Welcome back. Prince William has returned to his public duties for the first time since his wife, Catherine's cancer diagnosis.
And for more, we're joined live by Richard Berthelsen, CTV's royal commentator. Richard, what significance, if any, is there with this particular charity being chosen for the return to public duties?
I don't think there's any particular significance. I think this is probably in the prince's diary for this day, and so it has been that he has returned to the office, in a way of speaking, with this particular charity. I mean, the prince is extremely involved with a number of issues related to environmentalism, but also to improving the life of people living at the margins in UK society. So whether that be through housing or whether it be through food security. This is a project he went to today called Surplus to Supper, which is basically an opportunity to take food that would otherwise be destroyed and wasted and repurpose for people who may need it, and much as we might see in a food bank or something like that here in Toronto. So, I mean, I think this is something he was planning to do anyway. It happens to be that this is the day he's gone back. And obviously people were happy to see him back at work, and I think a number of people brought along cards and other good wishes for the princess.
Richard, this return to the spotlight comes after an enormous amount of speculation over Princess Catherine's whereabouts, intense scrutiny. How does the prince navigate all that?
Well, I think he is like his grandmother, very much of the, keep calm and carry on, never complain, never explain variety. I mean, obviously, he's taken a little extra time. He has not been particularly active in the royal family, aside from some of his regular duties, since she first went into the hospital in January. And of course, then obviously things took a turn when they got the diagnosis at the end of February. She made her dramatic statement about a month ago, and the family promptly went on an Easter vacation, which in the UK lasts quite a long time for young people. And they took that time with the kids. So, I mean, he is navigating this, trying to carry on. At the same time, he's obviously being very available to his wife and to his children to kind of get them through this. And obviously, they've had an opportunity to rethink about this over the past 4 weeks. And here we see him today.
Yeah, and along those lines, William showing continued support for Kate as she undergoes treatment. Is this going to be a graduated return to public duties or just full steam ahead?
I think the prince will undertake as many duties as he can. Remember, the king is a bit out of commission, although he has been gradually returning to duties in the last few days. Other members of the royal family have continued their regular duties, filling in for the king where necessary. I think the prince will start to increase his duties as we go towards the main summer season. And I think once Catherine, the Princess of Wales, once she feels that she can go about her duties in public, I expect we'll see her, and probably that will be a gradual return over time. She may return for some of the major state occasions, or she may undertake some engagements for charities and causes that she's personally associated with.
CTV's royal commentator Richard Berthelsen, thanks so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching CP24 Live at Noon.